There are few things in life more satisfying than a perfectly cooked steak. The crust, the juices, the smell coming off a hot cast iron, it's primal in the best possible way. But walk up to the meat counter without a game plan, and suddenly you're staring at different labels, wondering what any of them actually mean. Filet mignon? Sure. Picanha? Flat iron? Isn't that for hair? Don't worry. Here's everything you need to know about the most important cuts of steak, where they come from, and what makes each one worth your time. Filet mignon. Cut from the tenderloin, a long, cylindrical muscle that runs along the spine, filet mignon is the most tender steak you can buy. The reason it's so soft is simple. The muscle does almost no work throughout the animal's life, which means almost no connective tissue, almost no fat, and a texture so delicate you can cut through it with a butter knife. That same leanness, though, is also its Achilles heel. Without fat to protect it, filet mignon overcooks quickly, and when it does, there's no saving it. Cook it to medium rare, finish it with a knob of butter and a sprig of thyme in the pan, and consider pairing it with a rich sauce made from béarnaise, peppercorn, and red wine reduction. The meat is mild enough that it welcomes bold accompaniments. It's the most refined steak on the menu, and the price tag reflects it. Ribeye. Few steaks inspire the kind of devotion that the ribeye does, and it earns every bit of it. Cut from the rib section of the cow, it's home to muscles that don't work particularly hard, which means the meat is naturally tender. But what really sets the ribeye apart is the fat. The marbling runs through every inch of it, and when that fat hits a hot pan or grill, it bastes the meat from the inside out, delivering a depth of flavor that no lean cut can replicate. It's rich, beefy, and deeply satisfying in a way that feels almost indulgent. A good ribeye doesn't need much, just salt, pepper, high heat, and a proper rest. New York strip. The New York strip is the cut that built the American steakhouse. It comes from the short loin, a long muscle that runs along either side of the backbone, and it offers enough marbling to stay juicy, enough structure to have real presence on the plate, and a clean, assertive, beefy flavor that doesn't overstay its welcome. It's not as buttery as the filet, and not as fatty as the ribeye, but that's precisely the point. The strip sits right in the middle, and for a lot of steak lovers, that's exactly where they want to be. Some menus list it as the Kansas City strip. The name changes depending on who you ask, but the steak remains one of the most reliable cuts in the business. T-bone. The T-bone is the steak for people who want everything on one plate. A T-shaped bone runs right through the middle, separating two distinct muscles, a New York strip on one side and a portion of tenderloin on the other. You get the firm, flavorful chew of the strip alongside the buttery softness of the tenderloin in every single meal. The bone itself isn't just for show, it conducts heat during cooking and adds a subtle richness to the surrounding meat. The one thing to watch is that the two muscles cook at different rates. The tenderloin side is thinner and more delicate, and it can get ahead of the strip if you're not paying attention. Cooking it over open flame gives you the most control, letting you position the more forgiving strip side closer to the heat. Porterhouse. The porterhouse is essentially the T-bone's larger, more ambitious sibling, cut from further back along the loin, where the tenderloin is at its thickest. According to USDA labeling requirements, a porterhouse must measure at least 1¼ inches thick, and the tenderloin section has to be a meaningful portion, not just a sliver. The result is a steak that can comfortably feed two people, with a generous strip side and a full, substantial tenderloin. It's the steak you order when the occasion calls for something grand. Tomahawk. A bone-in ribeye with the full rib bone left intact, sometimes stretching up to 18 inches long. The tomahawk is as much a spectacle as it is a steak. It typically weighs around 1.5 pounds, runs close to 3 inches thick, and arrives at the table looking like something a Viking would carry into battle. Some butchers trim the bone clean for maximum visual drama, others leave the meat on. Either way, the long bone isn't just for theater. It helps conduct heat evenly through the thick cut and contributes to the flavor of the surrounding meat. Because of the thickness, the best approach is to sear it aggressively on both sides to build a crust, then finish it in the oven until the internal temperature hits medium rare. Rest it generously before slicing. Sirloin. The sirloin is the workhorse of the steak world, and it doesn't always get the credit it deserves. Cut from the rear of the cow, it's leaner than a ribeye and less tender than a strip, but it carries a robust, deeply beefy flavor that holds its own against much pricier cuts. The top sirloin is the more desirable of the two sections. It responds well to a quick, hot sear or direct grill, and a good marinade will take it even further. The bottom sirloin is tougher and is often better suited to roasting or slow cooking. What makes the sirloin worth talking about is its accessibility. It's widely available, noticeably cheaper than the premium cuts. And when treated with a little care, it produces a genuinely satisfying meal. Flank steak. Flank steak comes from the abdominal muscles of the cow, and it's been working hard its entire life. That means it's lean, fibrous, and carries a serious grain running through it. Cooked without care, flank can be chewy and underwhelming. But treated right, it's one of the most flavorful and versatile cuts available. The keys are simple. Marinate it to help break down the muscle fibers and add flavor. Cook it fast over high heat to medium rare. And always slice it thinly against the grain. That last step is non-negotiable. Cutting with the grain gives you long, stringy, tough strips. Cutting against it shortens the fibers and makes the whole steak dramatically more tender. Flank works brilliantly in tacos, sandwiches, stir-fries, and carne asada. It's a budget-friendly cut that rewards a bit of knowledge. Skirt steak. Skirt steak is the fajita steak, and if you've ever had a plate of properly made Tex-Mex fajitas, you already know how good it can be. It comes from the plate section of the cow, between the chest and abdomen, and it's long, thin, and packed with an almost aggressive, beefy flavor, which is arguably more intense than flank, and with a looser, more open grain that soaks up marinades exceptionally well. It's not the most tender cut, and it has prominent connective tissue, but that's what makes it such a perfect candidate for a hot, fast cook. Sear it over screaming high heat for a couple of minutes per side, rest it briefly, and slice thinly across the grain. Take it past medium and the texture deteriorates quickly. Keep it right and skirt steak delivers some of the most punchy, satisfying flavor of any steak at its price point. Hanger steak. Hanger steak is one of the great insider cuts because, back in the day, butchers kept it for themselves instead of selling it. It hangs near the diaphragm of the animal, nestled between the loin and ribs in a spot that doesn't do much heavy lifting, which gives it a tenderness that surprises people who assume it belongs in the same category as flank and skirt. The flavor is intense and deeply beefy, with a slight mineral edge that comes from its proximity to the organs. In France and Belgium, it's the traditional cut for steak frites. In Mexico, it's known as arrachera. It's marinated, grilled hot, and served sliced with salsa and guacamole. Flat iron. Cut from the shoulder blade, the flat iron steak is one of the most underrated pieces of beef you can buy. It gets its name from the shape. It's a rectangular cut with uniform thickness throughout, resembling the sole of an old-fashioned clothes iron, and it punches well above its weight in both tenderness and flavor. It is, remarkably, the second most tender muscle on the entire steer, sitting just behind the tenderloin. Running through the center is a line of sinew that needs to be removed during butchering. If your butcher hasn't done this, the steak will be tough in the middle. When it's been properly prepared, though, flat iron is extraordinarily versatile. It takes to a dry rub, responds well to marinades, grills beautifully, sears well in a pan, and holds up in sandwiches and salads. Picanha. Brazil's national steak cut is one of the world's great treasures, and for much of the Western world, it remains criminally underappreciated. Picanha, also called the sirloin cap or rump cap, sits at the top of the rump, and it comes with a thick, generous fat cap that is the entire point. In Brazilian churrasco tradition, that fat cap stays on throughout the cook, rendering slowly over the fire and basting the meat continuously as it goes. The result is an extraordinarily juicy, flavorful steak with a slight char on the outside and a tender, rosy interior. In the United States, many butchers automatically trim and divide it into other cuts, never letting it reach its full potential. The best approach is to find a Brazilian butcher, ask for it by name, fold the steaks into a C shape with the fat side out, skewer them, and cook them over direct flame. If you've only ever encountered picanha at a Brazilian churrascaria, cooking it at home will feel like a revelation. The world of steak is far deeper than most people realize, and some of the finest cuts are sitting right at the bottom of the meat counter, overlooked, underpriced, and waiting for someone who knows what they're looking at. Now you do.